Hello, everybody. Welcome back to the fourth Veloren Reading Club. We've held a few of these so far, and sort of the idea behind them is that we can have core developers from the project come out and talk to us about the code that they're working on and explain to us some of the stuff about maybe some of the more difficult systems or sort of just demystifying some of the ideas that we use. And so in the past, we've looked at maybe some like terrain, like how stuff is placed on in the world. We've looked at how buildings are created in towns. And today we're going to have Sam with us to talk about attacks in character states. So I'll just bring Sam on here. Perfect. There we go. So hello, Sam. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what we'll be learning today?
So whenever your character is attacking or rolling or really doing any action, that has an animation especially, it'll probably be through a character state. And so your character can be in one character state at a time. And so the character state system sort of handles the logic of transitioning from one state to another, as well as anything that happens within a particular state.
Yeah, okay. And so I see right here we have like an enum representing quite a lot. And so do you have like much of an idea of like what we'll be playing around with today, what we'll be implementing?
Yeah, so in addition to showing how to modify a character state to include additional functionality, I'll also be showing how to create a new character state and some of the stuff that goes into that.
Awesome. Yeah, I'm definitely pretty excited for this. And so the character and like attack system in Veloren. So we have characters that run around the world. NPCs can attack, players can attack, and other characters around like just other animals and stuff can attack. And so like when we think about how a character attacks, what might be the difference between it and some other things?
So actually the player characters and the animals will go through the exact same system.
Okay, interesting.
The only thing that differs is so the attacks come from the tool or the weapon that they're wielding, and animals are given a different tool than humanoids would otherwise be.
Okay. Yeah, so in that case, I'll let you dive right into it. You can start bringing us through some of the code here, and I'll keep an eye on chat if there's any questions. And also, if I have anything that I'm wondering myself, I'll bring it up.
So character states, most of them contain some type of internal data, and this internal data goes through a trait that guarantees it a certain functionality, which is a... Oh wait, it's not actually in this file.
While Sam's looking for this, I should also mention, because I forgot to introduce them, Sam is the combat lead of Veloren. And so Sam has done a lot of work with animations, with character attacks, with design of how attack works in game. And so
I haven't done animations.
Oh, okay. Well, it is bordering animation. So you worked with Slipped to, I assume, get combat working.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is the trait I was mentioning. So there's a variety of functions. Behavior is the required one that each character state needs to implement. And then the other ones, this has some optional fallback implementations, but the character state can modify them if it so chooses. So I'll look at basic melee as an example here. It's fairly simple. It's a basic melee attack. You see there's a few durations. This is actually new here, but this is used to construct the melee attack at a certain point in the character state. And this is some sort of information about how the ability was activated. And so we've actually separated this out into sort of a separate struct here, which is data that's meant to be static throughout most of the character state. And that's separate from other data here, which will change as the character progresses through the character state. So if we look here at an example character state, so this is the behavior function I mentioned that had to be implemented for the character behavior trait. And as it progresses through the stage sections here, there's usually 3 stage sections in most character states. It starts with build up, which normally is just a timer ticking down. And once it reaches a duration, it switches to sort of an action state. And in most character states, this is when the attack happens. So in basic melee here, you can see the melee constructor field here becomes a melee attack that's inserted onto the entity. You don't have to worry too much about how this happens. That's sort of unrelated, but it goes for the action state, inserts the attack, and then at that point, there's a timer that happens in the action state, and then it switches to the recover stage section, which is usually also just a timer. For some states, there might be a little bit of extra functionality added where it attempts to reset the state a bit early, which allows for a smoother transition from one character state to another, which helps with animations.
Okay, so if I understand correctly, like anytime that we're talking about any attack in game, then we can sort of break it down to these 3 stages that are based on timers, but allow for animations to more smoothly have like an intro and outro period instead of just the attack itself.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
And there are a few more stages as well. So the more, if I can type, the more complex character states might also have, we have movement and charge as 2 other possible stage sections you could be in. So charge melee, the hammer's secondary attack has this where you are sort of in the charge state for some amount of time as you charge an attack, or movement, sword dash, and the hammer and axe leaps go through the movement stage. But most character states, if they have stage sections, will go through build up, action, and recover.
I see. And can I just get you to hit Control+ one more time, just make it a tiny bit bigger? It's probably fine if you look at it full screen, but I'm just looking at it a little bit small here. Okay, perfect.
So most of our character states sort of have most of the data separately contained in a separate place, which are called character abilities, and this is sort of what we have in the RON files that we have, which allow it to be sort of externally organized outside of code and modified. So you can see your basic melee. There's 5 main fields that allow sort of describe it. The energy cost, which you'll notice was actually not in the information here. That's because we only need to know it before you enter the state. But once you're in basic melee, we don't need to worry about how much it costs to enter it. And for the other states, you can see there's other fields as well. So when you send an input to the server, it will try to, let me see if I can find it quickly. There you go. Not used to this being zoomed in. You can see here it goes from character ability and a few other bits of info to a character state, where it sort of, there's a conversion layer here. And so I guess to show what this looks like in the RON files, you can see here this happens to be for the Yeti, but you define it like this in the RON file.
With this sort of like definition, I'm wondering how expressive can it be? So let's say I want to add a character and I feel like it doesn't have the ability that I want, or like it doesn't have some parameter that I want. Then would I be able to easily go and edit sort of like what it's doing on the Rust side to be able to do something differently? Or is it pretty rigid that you have to work within the constraints that are provided?
So it's relative freeform, though you might need to sometimes modify an existing state or add a new character state if you want additional functionality. So I'll probably get into that as an example now. So let's say the charged range character state. If we wanted to add a particular debuff to it when it hits an entity, currently it doesn't support that. So you can see here there's a few fields it adds. And I did just merge something, which makes this a bit more difficult to copy paste over. I was going to copy paste something to ease the adding something, but so if we wanted to add a buff, say to it, I'll make it generic and allow for sort of any combat effect to be added. Let me see what it's called again. Oh, that's not what I want. Is this buff that I want? Probably should have prepared a bit more before starting.
Oh, good.
Actually, I can look at what is that called? Does this have it? Oh, this does have what I'm looking for. Perfect. Where? Ah, this is one. Okay, yeah, just combat effect. So quickly add this. And so then we can go to back to ability here. Find charge range. Add it here as well. Go through anywhere that's an exhaustive match statement.
Do you have Rust Analyzer or RLS enabled right now?
No.
Playing hard mode, I see. James did that last session as well. Personally, for myself, I always work with as many tools as I can get given. But
yeah, no, you just need cargo check.
Yep.
So we'll add that there. Where do I need to go now? So then to add the functionality of this, we want to go to when the projectile is constructed. And depending on how annoying I made this, I might have to... Oh yeah, I'm going to have to modify this a little bit. So consequences of my own actions here made it more difficult than it needs to be to add this in.
So while Sam's going through this, I'll explain a little bit about the idea of like the exhaustive match that he was mentioning. And so in Rust, we can define a lot of functionality through, or a lot of variants through an enum. So when we wanted to add this damage effect functionality, we can first define it in an enum, but then everywhere else that would be able to look at anything that's related to whatever a damage effect is has to properly have like a case that can match against damage effect now. So Sam's going through and making sure that all of those match, but then also going through some other places and just making sure that that stuff lines up here. But then when you go and compile your program, it will actually tell you if you have done it correctly in every area, if you've implemented in this case damage effect in all of the different variants or in all the different match statements. And so this definitely helps us sort of break the idea of like what combat is down into like nice and simple forms where when we're stepping through states, it can only be a certain amount of things, and then making sure that we implement all of those things in the right places. And so after Sam's done getting everything set up here, we'll probably run a cargo check and then see if everything went through properly. And then we can be pretty confident that when the code runs, that will be good to go.
So yeah, I'm going to cheat a bit and only add the damage effect to arrow quickly. But so if we go to the bow, for instance, we can add the effect we just added here. And cheat a little bit and sort of copy paste from somewhere else. And let's see, instead of bleeding, what's a good buff to add to this?
So if I understand correctly, what we're implementing sort of is like if you attack with this ability, then it will apply something.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so right here I'm adding it to the main attack of the bow.
Okay.
What's tied to the left mouse button.
Okay. So yeah, like when you use the bow, if it hits, then it can do some type of damage. In this case, we're going to say it's doing burning.
Yeah, and I'm just going to up the chance to 1 so we know it happens. So it should all compile, but...
Yeah, so this cargo check will tell us if everything's in order. And then the benefit of doing this check is that like with the Rust compiler being, match exhaustive, and then also the borrow checker will make sure that once we go and run this code, we can be a lot more certain that it's going to run properly. And so we shall see if Sam did indeed implement all of the match statements everywhere they need. But then, one place here.
Did I? There we go. Forgot to make this an option.
Yes. So this is one of like the sides of Rust that like when we're working on such a large project, it makes it more difficult to have something always running in the background that can check your code. And so me on my like beefy 16 thread computer, I don't find it too bad at all. And also with my like 32 gigs of RAM plus like swap space and stuff like that, makes it pretty nice.
I don't know. It sounds worse than my specs.
Oh yeah.
No, it's the same. And so it looks to have compiled. So it looks like it will compile. So I'll
perfect. Go for the
compile
build.
that. Nope, never mind. Where's
So while you're working on this, someone mentioned in chat, Rust is lovely, yet pain in the ass. How to postpone learning it, but the community is creating so many libraries and materials that is quite learnable. So yeah, I definitely agree. There's the learning curve that you have at the beginning, but then the thing about this learning curve is that it's like an investment, because once you start writing code that works or that compiles, then it helps you out so many ways down the road. And so one of the ways that we use like this guarantee by Rust so much is that we can have like a dev team of so many people working on the code base every week and have to worry a lot less about like people's code not working with one another. A lot of our code reviews tend to be, is this code optimized, instead of will this code work with my code? And so it has given us like a ton of benefits as an open source project. And then as we can see here, it is, so Rust does have like the slower compile time because of these guarantees. But any Rust developer who's been working on a project for a while will likely tell you that this it is definitely annoying, but it's for the greater good.
And honestly, Veloren's probably big enough now that in any language it would take a while to compile.
Yeah, with all our 690 dependencies.
Incremental does make the dependencies not matter as much, though.
Yeah. So and there's definitely like a lot of work being done on that area of like improving incremental compilation time, or just like compilation time in general. But there's like a lot of small things that have to be worked on.
So I guess if any of you have questions while this is compiling on what I did there, since I think I might have gone moderately fast.
So I think something I'm wondering is like, so we have the ability now to add in the RON file this like combat effect. And then when it gets imported, it didn't seem like you added a lot of functionality. You more just like tied some things together. And so
yeah, so a while ago I sort of extracted out a lot of the combat info and effects that can exist. So it's made it easy to add new effects pretty quickly. So here's a list of like the current combat effects that are supported. You can add a healing, a buff, knockback, energy reward, lifesteal, poise, or combo. And so one thing you note is attacks don't necessarily only have to apply to enemies. They're set up so they can apply to any entity. I have an enum in here somewhere which dictates how it what it targets. I think it's target. There's target in there somewhere. Group target. Here we go. So attacks have this as an option where if it's specified as some option, if it's in group, it'll only hit people in your group. Outer group, only outer group.
Oh.
And if you don't have a specifier there and you put none, it'll hit everything. So as an example, the Mind Flayer's Vortex, you'll notice it. If you play the game, you'll notice it also damages the summons that it summons. And if you were to aggregate any cultists, it would damage those as well. That's the main example where this functionality is used. Scepter did used to use it when it had the damage and the heal on the same beam, but no longer.
Yeah, and I can imagine like in a game that like if you wanted to make a harder mode or something like that, you could pretty easily just use this toggle to allow team damage or something like that. So would you make that change in a RON file? Like if you wanted to be able to attack your own, like the people in your group or whatever?
Right now, this isn't specified in the RON file, so melee and projectile attacks are probably going to be the cleanest to go through and look at. But so if we look at melee attacks, so this is what a melee attack looks like. It contains the attack field, which is kind of what I was looking at there previously, where it specifies what it can target. But so what's in the Ronfire is a sort of simplified melee constructor, which allows it to quickly construct a melee attack without needing to have the same fields in every single character ability enum variant that has a melee attack. So you can see here, this is where it creates the melee attack from the melee constructor. And so here it goes through the different types of melee constructors you might have had. So a slash here, compiled.
All right.
Any damage, poise, knockback, or intrusion, it'll add onto the attack just automatically. And it's in this constructor that we add the specifier here that it only affects people out of the group. So the Mind Flare Vortex actually goes through melee system. And here, where is this? This is where we would have specified a particular target, but we have it none. So if you wanted to, you could pull it out. Maybe you add it to the Necrotic Vortex variant, or maybe you make it a field on melee constructor here. But yeah, it's not something you can just immediately do through Ron. You would instead have to
like implement the have it be able to pull in.
So we'll see how long this takes to load.
One question from chat while we're waiting. Because of all of the like if config wasm, someone's asking, is Veloren wasm compatible?
Whenever someone does an MR that adds all those not target wasm, then yes. It does break, I think, fairly frequently, since I'm probably not the best person to speak on it since I haven't been involved much, but the wasm support was added for mods. Or plugins, I should say. And it's still a very experimental feature early on. That's not fully fleshed out yet. But I'll quickly sort of show what the flaming effect would look like. You can see there, with the chance to, at one, they automatically catch fire.
Interesting.
And yeah, it just works once you add it with the constructor it goes through.
Yeah. Who's healing them?
Villagers have potions, so
okay.
So I guess now I'll quickly show how to add a new character state.
Yeah.
So usually it's best not to actually start with the character state, but to go to where the character abilities are defined. So as an example, let's say we want to make a character state where you sort of fall, and when you hit the ground, you do a melee attack. So not leap where you start at the ground, leap up, and then fall, but one where you sort of need to be falling downwards first. So we might call it, this is the part I'm always bad at, we'll call it impact melee. And so, in this, since we plan for it to start when you're in the air and falling, we won't give it a build-up duration, but we'll start with a movement duration. Actually, we might not need a movement duration since that, no, we do probably want a maximum amount of time. So the movement duration of, at most, how long you'll be falling. And then we'll give it the duration here for how long you're sort of doing the melee attack, and we'll give it some amount of recovery period. And then, of course, we'll want the melee attack. And what else do we want? For now, I'll leave it to this. If I'm making it and decide I want something else, you can go back and add it.
So is this a enum variant that you're adding right now?
Yes.
Okay.
So if I scroll all the way up, it's quite long. It's the character ability enum, and I guess there's one thing to talk about in Rust. So in Rust, the enums, you can have them contain various data to ensure that a particular variant always has some data attached to it, but not other data. I think tagged enums are or tagged unions are what it's normally called in other languages. So I'll add it here. I'm going to be lazy and not add a dot comment. Normally you should probably add dot comments. I'm going to need to define that. Then we'll create a new. Usually I end up being lazy and just copy paste from another character state to start.
Mm-hmm.
It makes it faster, and normally it doesn't matter too much.
Yeah, it definitely reduces the mistakes you might make in forgetting what to implement.
Yeah. So start out with the fields we defined. Yeah, that's all probably fine. So then we'll go back to ability here. And actually, one way to find where every match statement is to just run a cargo check and see where errors pop out. Since everywhere that we would care about this being has a match statement, or has an exhaustive match statement, I should say. Oh, it's complaining about this file. That's annoying. Okay, I guess I do have to start with this file then. So there is no build-up section in this character state, so we can safely delete that section. You're going to be falling in the air. We don't want you to be able to move, jump, or otherwise orient yourself, so we'll remove that. So during movement, you're not actually going to be moving during movement. You'll just be falling. So we need to remove all of that. And so one thing, so this function here is to account for different weapon speeds or having a buff. However, we don't necessarily want this to go slower under the effect of a buff. So we instead are going to change it to what is this? Okay, that should be what we want. Actually, so first, so we want the movement section to end when when any entity lands on the ground. So I probably should have started with this instead of what was there with copy pasting. So we know you're on the ground when there's a block beneath you. So we can just check is some there. And when you land, we want to transition to the action section of a character state. So with the stage sections, it's kind of nice. You can sort of have relatively isolated logic for each section that you're in.
Mm-hmm.
So you notice here there's a match on the stage section. So you don't need to necessarily worry about what might be happening in the recover section while you're under the movement match arm here. Let's change this to impact melee, actually. So yeah, when you land on the ground, we want to reset the timer and then transition to the action state. And every other field itself, in this case, whether the attack's already happened or the sort of static data of the attack, we want to keep it the same. Otherwise, if you've been falling for too long, so we do want the character state to end without landing if you're falling a very long distance. We don't want you to sort of endlessly be stuck in this character state. So in that case, if the timer is has gone longer than the movement duration, actually, No, so if the timer is not yet to the movement duration, that's when we want to tick the timer. And then in that case, if you've not landed on the ground yet and the timer's past movement duration, we actually are going to want to end the character state. So just going to copy from there. Oh, actually, Angel, remind me at the end to talk a little bit about the join data and the state update that we have happening here, since that's is important to how the character state's functioning. I'll give a very brief sort of explanation of it. So join data is a bunch of data that is the character states can reference to see what's happening in the world and with regard to the exact entity that is performing the character state. Whereas update here is a sort of a list of changes that need to be applied to the entity at the end of each tick of the character state system. So here you're changing update and telling it to change the character state from whatever it was at to the wielding character state. Which will happen if you haven't landed on the ground yet, or if the timer has gone past the movement duration. So then
within like this data, you say like, so for example, we can ask it, are we on the ground? We can say, okay, set this entity to do something else, but then can we ask it for stuff in the world around it, or just about the stuff that's in the world, like that is data that it consists of?
Yeah, so I'll quickly go to where it's defined. So most of it is about the entity itself, but there are some things here. So the terrain grid is in there, so you can see what terrain surrounds the entity, which is useful for the character states where you summon things like sprites or other entities, since it's useful to know where the ground is, so you don't summon stuff inside of a block. But I think, and then the material stat manifest here is an ECS resource that's not specific to your particular entity, but used to, right now it's not really used for much, but it will be used for modular weapons when that merges.
Wait, you're the one heading up modular weapons, right?
Yeah.
Praise be the modular weapons. Someday they might even be merged into the main game.
No, this isn't a modular weapons. This was so a Weinstock did a sort of initial proof of concept for modular weapons and had most of the, not most, but some of the functionality working, which this is from that. But all the other fields here are, delta time is also a sort of specific to the world. But all of the other fields here are specific components that are on a particular entity. So the UID, the character state, position, velocity, orientation, mass, so on. But going back to here, so then when the action state starts, that's when we want the attack to happen. So we'll have it happen immediately when you land. So we had the exhausted field on here, so you check if the attack's already happened. So if you are not exhausted, we can do the attack. Can I just copy it from here? I guess Elite Melee has it in Recover, but it's can be different depending on how you want the character state to function. So we have this where it creates the melee attack. And then otherwise, actually, so yeah, after the attack happens, we want to update this. So we tick the timer there, and then exhausted, we change to true, which ensures that you don't keep swinging once you land. So then after you swing, we want to check if the timer has not finished yet.
So just to take a step back here, the impact melee that we're implementing is like if we're like once a sword hits something, or
No, so impact melee is basically when you're falling down, we want it so when you land, you do an attack.
Okay.
So I'm bad at naming, so there's probably a better name that evokes that image.
No,
But
I think that makes a lot of sense. Now that that's sort of what I was thinking. I was thinking like when you ran into something, then you might do damage to it or something. But like if
no,
if you
yeah,
hit the
I
ground,
mean like
that makes sense.
a ground impact kind of.
Yeah. Okay. And
Um,
then in like what we're implementing right now, it seems very readable from top to bottom as like when I want to understand what Impact Melee is doing, I could sort of just read through all of these and say, okay, we have state we're in the action arm right now. And so then I
mhm.
can say, okay, well, as I like go from top to bottom, I can kind of understand, okay, there's something at the top, then we got a timer, then we got some transitions. And so it seems pretty readable and like almost self-documenting. And when you're going through and writing stuff, do you find that yourself?
Um, yeah. So actually, when I first started in Veloren, one of the like multiple of the first things I did were with the character state system, and so I beforehand didn't really have a code background, so that maybe lends itself to that. Um,
Yeah,
where
awesome. Yeah, I think it's awesome that you were able to start learning with Veloren. That's very cool.
yeah, I think mainly the people to think about that are Adam and Timo, who they're not as active now, but they were the ones that set up the initial character state system, which made it easy to work with.
Hmm.
Where you basically it's basically just a flow of logic. At the time, it didn't have these stage sections. It instead had basically these checks if a timer was below the movement duration or below the actual movement duration didn't exist. And it was so it had a timer going to the build up duration, then it swung, and then it had a timer going from the recover duration. And it actually took these durations and ticked them down instead of having a timer here, which um, probably made the logic more concise here, but was more difficult to set up animations for, which is
Mm.
one of the reasons it changed. Since once it started, you had no idea how long the initial movement duration was. It
Yeah.
would have ticked down to 0. Um, yeah, what was I doing here?
Feel like something
Okay.
in recover or no? Okay,
No, I'm still in action. So then if the timer is less than the action duration here, um, so action duration, we could technically have it instant, but having it over a small duration helps with creating animations for it, as you can tie an animation to a particular stage section. Uh, so then we tick down, and then once the timer is finished, we transition to the recover stage and reset the timer here. So then in the recover stage, we move the attack up to action, so we don't need to check if it's exhausted. Here we can just tick down or tick up the timer to the recover duration, and once it's done, enter the wheeled state and remove the melee component. And this is just so we don't have to have an exhaustive match statement for a stage section that should at least never be reached in this state. But just in case it somehow does get reached, we have this bit here.
So this is like if there was a mistake in some logic or something, then we can easily handle it by just resetting the character to what the state should be. And then like so just like a little bit more meta, like when we're going through and adding stuff like this, should we also be adding something that allows us to see if something's reached by accident? Or is there some way of like logging that there might be a mistake?
Generally, when testing the ability, you'll notice when this happens.
It's very visual.
Yeah, so like let's say right here, I set it to go into build up, which doesn't exist in this. What would happen is you would start falling, and the second you land, there wouldn't be an attack. You would just go straight to build up. So it would be, in general, it's very noticeable. Especially, I would imagine for anyone animating the attack, there'd be an entire section where there just wouldn't see any logic happen.
Okay, interesting.
So in practice, logging is not too important.
Yeah.
I mean, we have logging. We probably should, but
yeah. Well, it's the same thing like where we don't have a very big testing suite. We don't like we have some tests that make sure that some deeper systems work, but we don't have like very macro testing suites that test a lot of stuff. And it's like we should, but Rust gives us enough guarantees that we're pretty safe while we do stuff, and we can test stuff in game, and nothing too big tends to come up. And so, yeah, I don't know. We're not perfect.
And then this bit here is if we wanted to allow an interrupt to happen, but in general it'll be falling, so we probably don't. Or at minimum, we want to only allow it in recover. So actually, in the beginning, let me go back to here. You'll remember I removed these. So I'm going to copy paste those back over. So it's mainly in the movement that we don't want to allow it, since you'll be falling. Once you're in recover, we can allow for maybe not jumping, but moving and orientation changing. So these numbers here are sort of efficiencies, which like it determines how quickly you can orient yourself or how quickly you can move. So we can leave it as a small number. But now this should all just work, except for the stuff I haven't yet done in this file, which I needed to actually handle the logic there first for the compiler to show me. So we'll wait for that to build a bit.
One question from chat asks, isn't it unusual to program a game with JavaScript? And actually, we're not actually programming in JavaScript, we're programming in Rust. And so the thing is about Rust is that a lot of the code actually does carry a lot of characteristics that you might see from other languages. And I think one of the things that Rust has a lot of is function chaining. And so when you want to either there's like the builder pattern, there's lots of other things when you're doing stuff with iterators that makes it look very like JavaScript. But it's actually a completely different language. And but yeah, I think that's definitely like it makes sense to sort of see this as JavaScript a little bit.
Yeah, I've never used JavaScript before, so I wouldn't know.
All good.
The only other language I really have a lot of experience, not a lot, but some experience in is, what is this? What was I about to say? Oh yeah, it's Python.
Python, yeah, that makes sense.
Not used to my terminal being on the right side of my screen here.
Yeah.
I guess nothing is. This is a new field. I'm not quite sure what it's for. Someone has added it after me. Well, that's compiling. I'm kind of curious what it does do.
I've been wanting to go and work on our documentation page a little bit because, like, I think every time we build and push through our master branch, we have like documentation, like in the Rust sense, like doc pages that are built. But the problem is that to display them, there's not like one central home page that then links out to other things. And so, yeah, I think being able to easily search across the code base tends to, you do that inside the code a lot, but it'd be nice if we had like a hosted one that was just as easy to use. And Rust documentation tooling is really, really great.
Oh, I see now. Okay. I think that's related to a change Zester made, maybe. Or no, oh no, it's Imbris. Okay. Imbris. Oh, that's what that's from. Okay, that's probably from Imbris making the character state system parallelized. Before it couldn't really be parallelized. There is something that I think it was a server events that didn't really go across threads well. So.
Oh yeah, that's right. I remember that problem because I think that's like the entity sync one or something like that. But during our last release party, after we got like 180 players on the server, it started slowing down a lot because of trying to send stuff to so many people at once.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so this is actually something I'm going to quickly talk about. So when you have a character ability and you're using it to enter a character state, you can check that certain requirements are paid. And this actually reminds me, energy cost is another field I want to add on Impact Melee. Except I made this, I think I just changed the zoom level. Hopefully that didn't affect anyone. So we want some energy cost there. But if we go back to here, requirements paid, we can add a So we add the impact melee here. And so we do want to check for energy cost. And the other fields at this point we don't care about. So I'll just copy paste this over. So we do want to check that the energy, you have enough energy to enter it. But then we also want to check that, what is it called here? That you're moving down. So we'll check that it's less than, we could do 0, but if we want it to be so you can only do it when you're moving down quickly. So for example, you wouldn't be able to activate it just by jumping. We can add a little bit of higher, I guess, more negative number there.
Is it possible to jump and then dash into the ground and cause it to happen? That'd be kind of cool.
Not anymore. Then adjusted by stats. We'll just copy this. Head to the bottom of this match statement. So these are the fields it has. In this case, I think we want so we don't want movement to be modified here. Since movement's more of used to make sure you're not in the state too long. So having an exact duration there isn't as important. But the other two states we can have affected by the speed that's on the weapon that you're using. And then, okay, so that should be everything we want to have modified there. And the last match statement should be in here. So
I'll be, if you're mute for a few minutes, I'll just let you take the helm and I'll be back in like 5-ish minutes.
Okay. So we'll head to the bottom of this match statement again. And so this is the match statement that controls going from the initial character ability to the character state. Since on the character state, you've probably noticed there's other fields that aren't in the, or that aren't defined in the character ability enum. So change these. And then energy cost, you notice here we drop it since we don't care about it once we enter the state. We only need to check before entering the state. And this bit is also important. We need to make sure you start in the right stage section. So this is one of the, I guess, main places where you could accidentally enter a invalid stage section if you're not careful with the starting section. But other than that, most places you should be fine. Oh. And we have a typo. So there's a typo there. Here, velocity is actually a vector, which is why this isn't working. So I'm going to change that to magnitude squared. In this case, we're doing squared since, No, yeah, we only want to check the z velocity here, actually. So we're checking the z velocity is less than 5. And then I have a typo here as well, since I can apparently spell very well. And then I guess while that's doing a bit of compiling, if any of you have questions, feel free to ask them.
All right, I have returned. Let's see what we got going on.
Just a bunch of exhaustive match statements I forgot about.
Classic. From chat, one person mentioning, I'm currently working on web dev, working to familiar myself with JavaScript, but I might jump into the process of learning Rust soon, or at least just the audio aspect of it. We do have a lot of interesting audio stuff going on with Veloren. We have, of course, like you can go down to the lower level. There's like the actual like how audio is being generated and stuff like that, or like sent to the system. But then a lot of people have been working on some like a little bit higher level stuff, and so I know recently we have like river noises. Like if you walk by a river, you can hear some noises from that are combined together. So really great stuff going on there. As for like web development, I actually did some front-end web development in Rust recently. I used the U library or U create to it like generates like similar to how React works, but it's all in WASM on the front end. It's pretty nifty, that ecosystem. So very little JavaScript, which is nice.
Okay, so it all compiles now. So now the next thing to do is to add this to a weapon. So as an example, we can add this to, say, the hammer. So you'll want to go to the manifest and run for abilities. Where is hammer? Here's hammer. And so we'll just add it as a skill. So then the abilities, the first field here is if you want to have it locked behind a particular skill. I'm just not going to have that happen.
Mm-hmm.
And
just
then the second field is where the file that contains the attack. So here we'll create a new file called impact. We'll just be lazy and copy paste it over. And so we'll give it an energy cost of, we'll leave it at 50. There is no build-up movement. Remember, this controls the longest amount of time you want it to fall for before it exits the state. So we'll give it 3 seconds. Swing duration, that's normally small since it's just animation purposes. Cover duration, we can give it some number like that. And then the melee constructor here, say we want to do 35 damage. You can leave it a bunch of poison knockback, and it shouldn't regen energy. The range we can leave there. The angle, we want it to hit all the way around, not just in front, so we'll leave it at a full there. And these fields don't exist on Impact Melee. So that should be all we need to worry about there. So it should just work now when
yeah, that's the Rust motto. It compiles, it probably runs.
The only thing is there won't be animations since I don't make great animations.
That's another team. We'll get slipped in here sometime to talk to us about do a reading club with us about animations. Slipped is listening in on the event stage on Discord, so they already know that it's a thing. Let's say in chat. Oh yeah, I'm very scared. Yeah, so just while we're compiling here, so in this reading club so far, we've taken a look at adding functionality to weapons that can like do stuff like add damage effects, add I guess like what types of damage it does, and other stuff based on that, and maybe like would you be able to add the ability to say like let's say I shoot something with an arrow and then I get like $20 or like 20 coins or something like that. Is that like within the realms of possibility through this system?
I mean, you could probably extend it to do that, but as the system is currently set up, no.
Okay. So you can extend to add that functionality. But just like something like pretty arbitrary, like it would seem like it's separate, or like you shoot something, you get a little bit of health back.
Yeah, so we have all the code for attacks go through sort of the same place. So melee attacks, projectile attacks, shockwaves, explosions, or beams, they all go through this system, and they have this structure that's called an attack. And so you can give it various damages, so it actually supports having multiple damages. So let's say you had a flaming sword, you could have it both do slashing damage and fire damage. If we had fire damage, we will eventually, but we don't yet. And then you can also have various effects here. So if we go down and look at damage, for instance, this is going to be a very long scroll. Where is this? So if we go down and look at damage, so attack damage, so it has a damage field, that's the actual damage. It has a target here of what you can target. And then it has some number of effects that can be applied to a particular damage. So you may have noticed there is also effects on the attack. This is if we want effects to be tied to a particular damage. So many of our effects sort of scale based off the damage dealt. When we tie it to damage, it's only that particular damage. So let's say an attack was half slashing, half fire, and you put a bleeding debuff and tie it to the slash damage. And that way, it's only the slash damage that scales the strength of the bleeding buff, not the burning damage won't affect it. But then you notice there was the attack effects that were thrown onto attack, but not tied to the damage. In this case, if we had this scale of damage, it would have scaled with both the slashing and the bleeding, or not bleeding, the slashing and the burning damage, if it scaled with damage. And so you can, depending on how you want the effect to scale or what you want to control the effect, you can choose to put it on tie it to a particular damage instance or to the attack as a whole.
Okay, I see. Yeah, so, and by damage instance, you mean like some type of effect, or just generally any damage instance could have other stuff attached. So for example, I swing my sword and it has a damage instance of get a little health back.
Well, no, so getting a health back would be an effect.
Okay.
In that case, it would be a lifesteal effect, I'm guessing.
Yeah.
Or maybe just a straight heal effect, but it would be depending on whether you want it to. So let's say it was straight lifesteal. If you wanted, or so yeah, let's go back to the burning sword example. So if it was straight lifesteal and we maybe only wanted to scale with the slashing damage, but not the burning damage, we might attach the lifesteal to the damage here. But if we wanted to scale with the sort of total damage on the weapon, both the slashing and the burning, then we might tie it to we might just make an effect that's directly on the attack.
Okay. Yeah, because then I can sort of see, like, if we take a look at like step back abstractly, we can see like sort of a tree. So like you're going to deal damage with the weapon, but it has this effect on it, which then like applies like a certain amount of damage or something like that, and then like maybe like a few other effects that can see like already how much damage has been applied and like query it as it likes.
Yeah, so if we go through the function that sort of applies an attack, there's the initial stuff here that determines if it hits the target. This determines if it's a critical attack. And then we have an accumulated damage here, which is sort of the sum by going through each damage. So then you go through each damage, you apply, or you see if there's damage reduction, you apply that damage to the target. And we do it through server events, so that a particular system that the attack happens in can be parallelized, since events are normally much faster than each tick of a system. So then we go through, there's a little bit of logic here because different damage kinds might have different effects, so slashing, crushing. And then we go through the effects tied to a particular damage instance. And here, so when an effect is tied to a damage instance, the only requirement for the effect to apply is if you deal damage on that damage bit. But if we tie an effect to the attack as a whole, we can have different requirements here. So damage being dealt, or it consumes energy, or consumes combo, which can affect the.
one more mention from chat. I'm very happy with the audio system and just the amount of work that is going into the audio system, because a lot of video game developers underestimate the importance of good audio. And yeah, I can definitely say, like, when it comes to Veloren, a lot of what we focus on as contributors isn't just the code base. Like we have a lot of people who love working on code and doing very low level things and making really awesome things happen because of it. And that's super awesome. But then we also have contributors who make amazing art, who make models, who make animations, who make audio, who write content for the game, who come up with what people should have for in their inventory, what like type of items there are. And so there's so many people contributing so many awesome things. And I mean, I was supposed to make some YouTube videos with the soundtrack a while ago. I haven't gotten to it yet. But we have a lot of really great songs that are part of the game. And so, yeah, definitely the audio is super important to us.
Okay, so you'll notice the ability here. It's that the purple. Oh, how do I free my cursor? It's the purple box here. I didn't go through and set any of that up in Voxygen, the front end, so it has no title or description, and there's no icon for it. So we'll notice if we jump, nothing happens. However, if you were noticing, you might notice my energy goes down. So that is actually a slight bug in implementation, where even if you can't use it, it will take some energy. But let's go up so we can use it. So here we're falling at least a little bit. I probably should have done that over something. So we go down. Oh. And you see, you land, do damage to a bunch of things. But yeah, there is that energy bug, and then you can't use it when jumping. It just attempts to consume energy.
Can you do me a favor? So jump up in the air and then fall straight at the ground, but don't move your camera as you're falling, just because like it's a little bit of frame rate. I want to see if we get like higher.
Okay. Let me go directly over something that won't move.
Yeah, and then it's gonna flicker a bit, but I think this might be okay. Yeah, so we still see like the knockback, even though like the frame rate drops down a little bit. But yeah, that's super cool. I think like it was a small amount of implementation, and like yeah, like small bugs that you're mentioning, but I mean, program didn't crash. It's easy to go and fix these types of things, and we can see the effect of stuff is already being pushed back just because like the pushback code's already there, the damage code being applied to it, like the radius and everything. You make the villagers mad. Yeah, so it's pretty great.
So like if we did want to fix that small detail, nope. Where is this? So we could probably go to it and look at something else that probably does something similar. Elite melee in this case. And it's probably just as simple as putting the velocity check before the energy check. And we can see if that works once that compiles. But so yeah, that's I guess while it's compiling, I can quickly talk about join data and state update. So the join data struct, I did already end up going into a decent amount of detail about, but it contains various components that are important to some character states that you can easily query. So all these components, and it also has terrain for some of the other states. But then the state update, let's see if I can find that. So this is a list of fields that can be updated. So character state, that'll obviously be updated as you progress through the character state, since we need to usually at minimum tick a timer that's on a character state. And then position, velocity, and orientation. Position we probably might want to try to move out at some point and leave that to the physics system by ticking velocity, but orientation and velocity are in there since some character states can modify those. For instance, just walking around will update your orientation and velocity. And then some character states on top of that, like leap melee or dash melee, additionally update velocity. And then energy. So some of the states that charge will consume energy over time. And then most of these other ones are sort of utility fields that are on there. And, I see Zester has a question. So I'm implementing a new character state to show how it's done. Also in the beginning, I modified a character state that already existed. And
yeah, so we added burning arrows. That was the first part, and then second of all, we added impact melee. And so if you're dropping from the sky at a certain velocity, then when you hit the ground, you create a little shockwave around you. That's what we're doing. One other thing from chat, the person who's asking about the audio system also mentioned that they actually made one of the songs in the game that plays at night. So yeah, awesome. Didn't recognize the username, but super cool to have like the dev stop by and contributor stop by. And yeah, definitely, like, I mean, if you've already made music, you know how good the music is, and so I don't really need to convince you. But yeah, I think this is just reminding me that I should really go put the songs up on YouTube so that people can listen to them.
So now you'll notice it doesn't rapidly consume energy. Though one interesting thing is you do actually reach -5 z velocity when just falling from a jump. So you, as it is right now, you are actually able to activate it. But yeah, to fix that, we'd probably raise it to negative. I don't know how fast do you fall. Yeah, we might raise it to like -20 or 30 even, depending on.
It'd be cool if there's a bigger shockwave depending on how far you dropped or something like that.
Oh yeah, so I could actually have set it up so it would emit a shockwave. I might. I guess there is time if I wanted to, but I guess at that point the state is mostly implemented. So if any of you have any questions, then feel free to ask them.
We'll try to wrap it up soon, just so we stay near an hour. I know the last one we did was closer to like 2.5 or something, but I like to try and keep them like nice and compact as possible. Could you give a demo? Asks Esther. So one more. We'll do one more demo, and then I think we can probably call it there. Unless Sam, is there anything else you want to mention in the code beforehand?
I think I've mostly talked about what I want to talk about. I might quickly demo making it a shockwave, which is a so you can see a what's it called? Sort of a shockwave effect from it.
Yeah. I think I imagine it's probably not super difficult. You just have to copy some more.
Yeah, so shockwave doesn't yet have a nice interface like Melee does for conveniently inserting stuff. So you notice this is a bit longer. All of this long stuff was in. Where's Melee? All of this long stuff is sort of handled by this helper function here, so you don't need to repeat it for a bunch of states. But so yeah, there's some amount of poise. It's hidden on the character state, so I might just set that as a hard-coded value for now, just for to do this quickly. What does this look like?
Also, while we were taking a look in game earlier, Sam spawned a training dummy, and I just want to say I implemented that. No biggie. Had a lot of help from Zester, but I just added it so you can type in a command and put in the game. So that was kind of cool. I tend to do like a lot of stuff on the back end, like server stuff and continuous integration, and so I don't do too much with the core game itself. But that's one of my prides and joys, the little training dummy. Oh yeah. Oh, we do have a SoundCloud. That's right. Yeah. Wait. Let me plug the SoundCloud. So I haven't actually like listened to everything on here yet. I feel like it was SnowRam who was talking to me about this before. But yeah, you can listen to everything very easily through there. It's just called Veloren Official, I suppose. We should update the image that's on there because that is not LOD terrain. We need to update our images lots of places. You should try adding more stuff to the game, Angel. That is true. That is very true. But then the problem is I have like a long list of things, like the fact that like people can't download the game properly right now. So I gotta like there's like some stuff I gotta triage high at the top priority. But That being said, there is a lot that I'd love to play around with in game, and so being able to hop into some of the systems, I think like as we've seen from the previous reading clubs, there's been a lot of people who have been who have seen the like watched the stream, kind of learned about what's going on, and then gone off and implemented stuff. Like we've seen some stuff in villages being implemented with the I think that's the Site 2 system. We've seen, wait, is it the Site 2 system?
Yeah.
Whatever. Yeah. Okay. So Site 2 is like buildings in the city, and then we've also seen like other buildings around the world. I've seen some awesome stuff in the gallery channel with that. And so this makes it like super accessible to sort of learn like what's the process that the core developers use to go and implement some of these things. And so like as we've seen today, some of these like the character attacks and character states, there is some implementation details on what's going on, but a lot of it has other code nearby that you can use as an example of what's going on.
Yeah, a lot of the times we'll start with copy pasting from somewhere else.
Callie Cash just said in chat, I think I can see the resemblance to the training dummy now. Are you referring to me? That's pretty good. Yeah, so as Esther mentioned, there's a lot of nice stuff that's coming together now. The code feels like it's becoming a lot more accessible. And so I think there's a lot of parts of this. This is like when you go and read code, that the documentation there makes sense, that like the general architecture is there. Also that you can talk with the people in our Discord who worked on these core systems and get like advice by them. And so of recent, there's been people who have been working on improving our issue system on GitLab. With these reading clubs, it's helping people get up and running with some of these like more complex ideas. But I'd really love to see more written content on this. And so like when it comes to, we have like our weekly dev blogs, but then also it'd be awesome if we could do like deep dives into systems that just explain from top to bottom what's going on from an architectural side, what's going on from an implementation side. And I'd love to see that for systems like our entity component system, for stuff like combat, even like with our rendering and world gen. We've seen that it's not impossible at all to go and add stuff to that. And so the more contributors with more ideas that can work on this, I think is always better. Yeah, when Sam mentioned that he was gonna implement the shockwave here, I'm like, oh no, we're gonna be here for another hour. And it's like, oh no, it's already done. Easy peasy, just copy paste. Yeah, sorry. And Zester mentioned in chat, when I've implemented things recently, I've been surprised by how little I've got to actually do to get stuff working. So yeah, I mean, as we've seen today, a lot of it is just copy and pasting a few things, changing it up, and that really lets us think about stuff at a like conceptual level of, if like as I mentioned, you read through the code and you can see what's going on, and it like makes sense. You don't have to get too caught up in a lot of like the really fine details to make stuff work.
It's taken a bit of work to get there, though.
Yeah, but I mean, we got the compiler on our side, so.
Like you notice with Shockwave here, it's still not as ergonomic as Melee was. Having it emit a melee attack was 5 lines or something, whereas Shockwave is, what is this? 40 lines.
Yeah, a little bit more. But I mean, like you mentioned that like there's like ergonomics to how other things are done. So I'm sure that you could probably put Shockwave into some sort of abstraction that allows you to.
Yeah, I do plan to eventually even. I just haven't yet. Like the melee constructor thing was actually something I merged a day ago, 2 days ago.
Oh, nice.
Projectiles do have a similar system, which has been around a bit longer, but it's not quite as ergonomic. So you notice when I was adding the charged range, a damage effect, it didn't go through this. That's because when I made the initial projectile system, I wasn't sure how to have it work for anything that charges and changes over time. But melee, I did figure out how to do it. So let's see if this emits a shockwave now. Well,
hey, that's cool. It did emit a shockwave.
Yeah,
not 360, but
I'm assuming that it probably was expecting an angle in degrees and not not radians, which might have been the issue.
Classic.
Where'd it go? So if we were to go here and remove this and recompile, it would probably work as expected, but I'm not too worried about doing that.
Yeah, so that's pretty cool though. So like you're coming down like the shockwave. I mean, the particle system is already implemented. Shockwaves are used in other places, and so I guess it's like where you're looking at it. Yeah, it emits in that direction.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah, I mean, this has been a lot of fun to go through and make sure that everything, or just like see how stuff is going. And do you happen to still have the arrows ready to go? Can we shoot something and light it on fire?
Yeah, that should still be here. So if I can aim, that is. There you go. So see, it lights them on fire.
The merchant fights back. All right. Well, I think we'll probably end it off here. So thank you, Sam, so much for showing us all of like a little bit of a deep dive into combat, showing us how we can play with some of this ourselves, implement some of these abilities ourselves. Let me see. Is there anything else I need to mention? I feel like there was. I don't know. Oh yes, I did want to say as well, in the most recent blog post that I put out, Sam wrote a section about a combat survey, and so it's talking about yes, like the new sword and what types of ideas could be implemented as abilities on it, if I'm not mistaken. Does that sound about right, Sam?
Yeah. So there's actually going to be a meeting on that within the combat team in a few days to sort of go through that survey and choose or even like create the abilities we want using that as inspiration, or even just taking some of those abilities there that were suggested. And so I could go a bit further in depth on that if you want, but
I'll leave it to the blog post for now.
A lot of it just hasn't been decided yet. We did have an initial meeting where we decided we wanted sword to be more stance focused, and potentially have the ability to switch between stances that change your primary attack. But none of it has yet been implemented yet.
And then another one is, if people want to get involved with either this initiative or other parts of combat, what's the easiest way for them to kind of get started? Should they reach out to you on Discord? Should they check in with the combat channel?
In general, pinging me with any questions is a good place to start. And yeah, you can, if you have the contributor role, talking in combat's always a thing you can do, or you can just ask in learning or new contributors. I do check all channels basically at some point.
Yes, we do have a lot of those. Many channels. Much writing. Yeah, so thank you so much. It's always awesome doing these like little deep dives, and this was a particularly cool one, I think, because we interact with combat quite a lot when we're playing the game. And so yeah, in that case, we'll be back probably in like 2 weeks with another Veloren Reading Club. I'm not sure what the topic is just yet, but we'll see you then.